Quick shout out to my amazing sponsors for the Patriot Barbie podcast. My title sponsor is Dr. Stephen Soloway. He is known globally as the Miracle MD. He's the author of Bad Medicine, a book about bad politics, bad government, bad hospitals, bad drug companies, and bad doctors. Buy it on drsoloway.com. My other sponsor, Celtic Plastics, is a water filtration system for your home and work that clears bacteria, fluoride, and heavy metals from your drinking water. You can buy one on CelticPlastics.com and use my code PatriotBarbie for 10% off. And one last shout out to Red Balloon. Thousands of companies are pushing back on wokeness in the workplace. Find a freedom-loving, non-woke job at redballoon.work and follow them on Instagram at redballoonwork. For all my sponsor info, book, and merch, go to PatriotBarbie.com. Like, subscribe, and share this podcast. Now, let's get into today's episode. Welcome to the Patriot Barbie podcast. I'm your host, Lindsey Graham, author and conservative activist. I love Jesus. I love America. I'm a proud wife, mom of 3, and I'm having bold and witty conversations with America's patriots, the ones that cancel culture desperately want to blacklist. Trust me, I've been there. In 2020, I defied government lockdowns in Oregon, reopened my salon, and became an icon of freedom. I've been targeted by government and raging liberals every day since, and I refuse to back down. Patriots, I'm here to tell you, your values are worth fighting for. The Patriot Barbie podcast starts now. Welcome to the Patriot Barbie podcast. Today will be an emotional day. I'm going to tell you a little story about my next guest, and I really need you to have the backstory to understand, where this conversation is coming from. As you all know, I'm a pretty aggressive person on social media. I love the Lord, but I've never felt called into like the passive kind of pastor's wife type of ministry. I'm more of like what people call a Old Testament Christian, like a fire Christian. So a lot of the times I get accused of being hateful and, of course, a bigot and a homophobe and a racist and all the things, but mostly hateful, right? Because I speak God's truth and I speak it unapologetically. And sometimes that comes off as, I guess, what leftists would like to call hateful. And, I don't apologize for that. So last night I attended Freedom Night. Charlie Kirk has a newborn baby. He tended to his beautiful daughter backstage, and Drew Hernandez hosted. And I really was impressed with Drew Hernandez because he spoke fire in God's truth as well. And I could, see his face getting red and fired up as he was talking about what we're doing to children by dismembering them and, the transgender movement and destroying their genitals and just how aggressive and angry we should be about that. And it reiterated to me that, even though some people don't like my approach, it works sometimes and it doesn't work other times. But a lot of times I'll have leftists come to me through Instagram or through Facebook and ask questions. And, I'm happy to answer them. But in the back of my mind, I'm waiting for them to ask me a question that they're trying to entrap me with, where they can turn and say, see, you're a homophobe, see, you're a racist, see, you're hateful, and turn on me and start calling me names. 9 times out of 10, that is exactly what happens. And so I cautiously proceed with questions in my inbox with leftists. And about a year ago, maybe a little over, I had a pro-choice, gay BLM activist come into my inbox and say, the first thing she said was, what if I'm not a Republican? What if I'm just human? And I went, okay, interesting question. I don't need to be friends with Republicans. I'm not only friends with Republicans. I don't only support Republicans. In fact, we're now seeing that Republicans aren't necessarily like the party to be aligned with. It's just people. So I said, yes, you can be human. In fact, I was just human once. And what I was trying to relay to her was, yes, I'm a human first. The reason I'm a Republican is because something happened to me that made me speak up politically. And I can't remember what entailed after that, but it was a series of conversations that led me to minister to this woman very unexpectedly. And I deserve no credit for that. God deserves all the credit. But the second person that deserves the credit is this girl, because as she came into my inbox asking questions, she was open. She had an open heart. She was seeking her return to the Lord. She was seeking truth. She was not out to hate me. She was out to hear truly like what I stood for. And, Last night Drew said what you stand for needs to remain the same. Your character and, oh gosh, your heart. And then there was one other thing. And that's something I have to check every day is like, am I still representing exactly what I say I represent? Am I being hateful or am I just speaking truth? And over the last year, my relationship with Amy has just blossomed into a friendship and a ministry. And, she teaches me things and I teach her things, and it's like a partnership. But what has happened is that the Lord has brought her back and used me to do it, which I'm very, very thankful for. And it's a beautiful honor. And again, I take no credit for that. It's the Lord working in her. And I brought her on the podcast because I want to hear her story, her journey, how a person goes from being legitimately a BLM activist, a pro-choice advocate. She was in Portland protesting. She was one of the people I stood up against and spoke out against 2 years ago. And now here we are in God's ministry together. And we're going to talk about their hard stuff. We're going to talk about her, transition out of the BLM movement and to being pro-life and to coming back to the Lord, and the church casting her aside because of her sexuality. And some people aren't going to like what she has to say, and they're not going to like what I have to say. But we're not here to please you. We're here to speak the truth and hope that Amy's testimony and my testimony, and then our collaboration together, speaks to the minority and speaks to people, and it really brings people to the house of the Lord and to Jesus. So, Amy, hi. I know that this is rough for you. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's my honor to be here.
Yeah, this has been. What do you think about coming on the podcast? I mean, how have you felt about it?
I have felt excited. I'm not going to lie. I've been nervous because, telling your story out there for everybody here can kind of bring judgment. It can bring stones to throw and it can bring arrows to throw. So it's been kind of interesting, but it's been what God has wanted me to do. Mm-hmm. So it's exciting, but, it's also an honor to be here with you and share our story together and what God has done. And it's time to be speaking it out. So that's why I'm here.
And you've already been canceled a little bit. Like the more you transition over to one side and speak out against something that you change your belief in, you've had hate mail, right?
I've had hate mail. I've had hate DMs. I've had people completely cancel me out, cold cut me out of their life. Like, we're not talking to you because you're speaking up. A whole bunch of different things from friends that I've known for years. And that was really close to, but also ones that have seen my story in that movement and now saying this, and they're going, we don't agree with you.
Right.
And I'm like,
I think that's so terrible. Like, these people know who you are intimately, but because you've changed your opinion politically or even, spiritually on some things, they're like, oh, we cast you aside. And I like to think that the conservative movement doesn't always do that. They do. But the goal here is true unity. And true unity to me, I think, means saying, hey, maybe we don't agree on everything and maybe we struggle with agreeing on some things, but to cast you aside isn't the true love of God. And so there are things you still struggle with that I'm ministering to you about and hoping that God does that, not me. Like, I'm not all knowing. I'm not a biblical scholar. I pray that God does what he does in your life. But if I were to have cast you aside because of certain things, that doesn't accomplish much in the world of spirituality. So tell me about your first experience with Christianity. Like, there's a reason you went away from the church and from Jesus. I want to know why. And it's not going to be pretty.
It's not going to be pretty. I was born and raised in a Christian home, so I knew about God and I knew about his power. That's all I knew. Like, that's the way I was raised. My parents really put in the biblical principles in my life. So I grew up knowing who he was. And we were involved in the church a lot growing up. So they ministered in all different departments. And then as I grew up, I was using my giftings with them, alongside of them, which was pretty awesome. So that's all I knew. And I grew up in the church until my early 30s, which is when I started to change. But So that's all I knew, and really sought God out and had a relationship with him and went to every event going on in church. You know how it is. If you're involved in it, you're there, and in a minister's kid, you're involved in it.
You were a minister's kid?
Yeah.
Too? Oh, I didn't know that.
I'm an evangelist kid,
It's
a
already
pastor's
getting juicy.
kid.
Oh my gosh,
The
it's already
juicy
juicy.
stuff is already happening.
Okay, we're making notes. So pastor's kid, PK, that's playing so much.
My parents started churches. They were training up pastors and leaders and worship teams. And then when I joined them, I was their drummer, one of their drummers, which I still am part of. I did all of that stuff with them. And then we traveled and sang, and they write music, and then I started writing music. So it kind of all just fit into place, you know, with that.
I want to ask you really quick though too, and I'm going to interrupt you because I want to grasp some of these things.
Yeah.
When you were, say, like you were raised in the church and you're a pastor's kid, there's a difference between like, oh, I went to church, I grew up a Christian, and like I felt the presence of God. And there's no right answer. I'm just asking, do you really feel like you were in a relationship with the Lord growing up? Or was it just kind of like, well, we go to church and that's what we do?
I felt like I had a relationship with God.
Okay.
That was a personal experience with me. I learned his voice very early on. And God started using me actually in prophetic later in my early 20s. Actually, no, I was 13 or 14 when I had my first open vision for a family member. And I remember thinking to myself when I saw that, like, it scared me because it was like, what is this? Yeah. But I knew it was God speaking. And so I did have that relationship with him. Probably in my later teens, it kind of started maybe twisting a little bit, like it was just kind of routine, type thing. But I still kept God in my heart. Like I still kept him close to where I was.
Yeah.
It really wasn't until I got married that I started to shift.
Okay.
Sort of. It was during the relationship that I shifted. So
okay, so is this man your husband? Did you meet him in church?
I met him in church. He was a minister, by the way. Okay. This is going to get juicy stuff today, right? So I met him at 18. No, I met him at 17, and got married early on. So I got married at 18. So I graduated from high school in 99, and I had graduated early, and then met him, got engaged on my birthday, and then by December that year I was married.
Okay, so married quickly.
Married very quickly.
Yep.
Which I don't recommend.
Would you did you get married because of the pressure, or a lot of Christians are like, oh, we're waiting till we're married to have sex, so they just get married to stick and have sex. Like, was it that? Or was it more just like, oh, you felt like this is the guy for you?
I felt like it was the guy for me. I prayed about it. We prayer has always been, and that's the thing too, like prayer has always been part of our home and my upbringing growing up. So we had prayed about it, and my parents were praying, and we really felt like, hey, this was the guy, Mm-hmm. And
by the way, I think he was the guy. Like, you say you pray about something, and God's never wrong. So you say you pray about something and you felt like he was the guy.
Yeah.
God was still using him. So God wasn't wrong. He wasn't not your guy, because we're about to say some pretty terrible stuff about this guy. But, right? It's like he was meant to be in your life, because even though some pretty terrible things happened with him, God is using that now for your testimony. So it's not like God put you in the wrong relationship. No. He said, you're going to do this. I know you're going to, and you're going to go through some stuff, but this is part of who I'm creating you to be.
Yeah. So. And it's really part of the storyline too, because, I'm excited to talk about it, because had it not been for him, I wouldn't be a mother today. And we'll talk about that too. But so anyways, we prayed about it, and we really felt like, hey, this was the guy. And we ministered and everything together. And, we started traveling together and did all those things. And I saw the red flag though ahead of time. There were some things that I was questioning, and I was like, but God, you said this was, I'm trusting you. I'm learning that, hey, this is probably where I'm supposed to be at, but still kind of struggling with that, early marriage stuff. And then I started seeing right away the abuse started happening.
Mental, emotional?
Everything.
Physical?
All of it.
All of it.
Yeah. So if you could imagine.
Yeah.
And he's a narcissist. So I started seeing those traits come out. Because what was on the platform was different than behind closed doors. And behind closed doors, that's where the abuse started. That's where the attacks started. And nobody knew, because I didn't say anything. Right. So, yeah.
And how terrifying, because when you're a Christian woman married to what is allegedly a Christian man, it makes you doubt yourself even more. Like women in abusive relationships are already, brainwashed, and they've been gaslit, and they've been demeaned to the point where they do believe this is all I deserve. But when you're a Christian woman, it's like you've got that extra hesitation to doubt God or to doubt the man of the home who's supposed to be the leader in the house. He's supposed to be leading and treating his wife like the church, So to speak out against a man like that and go, is anyone even going to believe me? I mean, how long did you endure?
9 years.
Oh, and you had a son though in that time.
Yes.
Okay.
So I definitely want, and this is part of the juicy stuff, and I want to talk about it. And this might get emotional because I believe that God works everything out for our good. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that He has reminded me the last couple of years is I take the messy situations and create a beautiful masterpiece out of it. Mm-hmm. So we went to Memphis. So I'm going to just back up. So we went to Memphis. He went to school ministry, and we ended up in Wichita, Kansas. And we were trying to figure out kind of what was going on and kind of where our bearings were, what we were going to do, what all the loose ends were happening. And so we end up there, and we ended up at my grandparents' church. And what was funny, we were supposed to be traveling, but the pastor recruited me and said, will you be our drummer for our church? And I was like, I'm going to pray about it. And then he comes to me later and says, I think you need to think about being our youth pastor for our church.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, and my husband at then was immediately no. Like,
well, because they didn't ask your husband, which I think is interesting. They asked you.
They asked, they kind of asked us together, but he also referred it to me because that was kind of the deal. It was like, that's where it was going. And my husband was like, no. And
why? Why do you say no?
Because he didn't feel like he needed to do that. His road was on the road. Mm-hmm. He felt like he wanted to be on the road instead. And I was going, okay, I'm kind of an alpha here in this,
I want what I want.
In this particular instance.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. So I was like, I'm going to go pray about it. Yeah. So I prayed about it, and God gave me the direct yes. Mm-hmm. And so I stepped into that position. I don't think he was too happy.
No. Well, and guess what? Like, he's not consulting God. Like you said, he's a narcissist. He's saying, no, I want what I want.
Right.
And if God's calling someone that's actually like following him into something and you're praying about it, hello, that's a lot more clear, definitive answer than a guy who's looking for his own glory and fame or whatever it is he was looking for.
Exactly.
And I'm sure the narcissist in him did not like that you were getting the offer and you were getting the attention, and it had nothing to do with him.
No, there was a lot of things, and we'll talk about the two, but there was a lot of things in the marriage that I look back at going, yeah, he really did strip my identity away. Mm-hmm. And now I'm like, it's crazy how God works that out. Like, he literally took the identity away. He demeaned my character, not only as a woman, but as a wife, a daughter, and then later a mother.
And a Christian, I'm sure, right?
And a Christian. Yep. And the jealousy kind of started taking toll, and it was all about him. And he treated me like an object and not his wife. And I was like, I don't think this is how this is supposed to go.
Dear Lord.
Like, I don't
think
you
want me to marry this guy.
Yeah, I'm like, wait a minute.
Please can I have permission to divorce him?
Like, yeah, I don't know.
Let's see, what does it say that you hate divorce in the Bible? Old Testament, any chance?
Right. Yeah. So, those things, and it made me feel worthless. It was like, who am I? Like, what am I doing? You know what I mean? Yeah. So I just kind of,
Okay. So you stepped into the youth pastor position. Yeah. He hated it. Did he obviously he dealt with it. You guys stayed there and...
We stayed there. I gave them a year commitment.
Okay.
They asked for a commitment, and I gave the year commitment.
What was he doing while you were doing this?
He was...
Besides pouting.
Pouting and possibly working.
Okay.
He was doing a lot of entrepreneur stuff, but that's kind of a tough subject too. But he was doing entrepreneur stuff, but he was just not in it. I mean, he was attending, he was going, he was just not.
It wasn't in God's will.
He just wasn't
doing his own thing.
He wasn't stepping into where I was doing, which was fine. God had me do something else.
Thank goodness, because he probably wasn't supposed to be there ministering to kids. Man, kids get ruined, not saved.
Yeah.
Lord. Yeah. Okay.
So during that time, I was also working for an optometrist. So, and I love telling the story because this is where it's amazing what happens when God shows up on the scene, because he knew the struggle and he knew what was going on behind those doors. But I was standing out in the parking lot of my work on a stormy day. And I remember just looking up in the sky. God specifically asked me, he said, what do you want? just like a loving father would do, right? You know, when our daddies are like, what do you want? What can I do for you
like,
today?
"Ooh, anything in the world.
And
if I
it
could have
was
it."
like, and I said, I want a son. He said, you got it done. And a year and a half later, I gave birth to my son.
Wow.
So that was an answer to prayer. And it was like, that was my desire. And God granted that. Even in the midst of chaotic situation, God still brought it to the forefront of saying, hey, you're my daughter. I'm going to give you the desires of your heart. And here's your son. So that was pretty, to me, that was like
A huge blessing.
a huge blessing. There's nothing like being a mother. So,
How long did you stay married?
9 years.
9 years, that's right. But okay, so the son was born. So how old was your son when you divorced finally?
He was 2. So he was really young. It's not ideal, obviously. You know, I regret a lot of those things. And so he was 2. And it got to the point
What do you
where
regret? Not divorce.
it being so young, I guess,
okay.
for him, you know.
No, I think it's better, Amy. Like if he were older and attached and like understood what was going on, that's so much harder.
They don't know at that age. Like they don't know what's going on.
And see, that's a blessing.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that we're not hyping up divorce. We're not encouraging divorce, but like you shouldn't have remorse or regret about something that needed to happen.
Yeah.
But you know, your child is going to be okay and God's going to protect him.
He's okay now, and we'll talk about that too. But then he was so young and he didn't know what was going on, and he was going back and forth between us. And those are the things I regret. It's the pain. I feel like I caused that pain. You know what I mean? By choosing to, he didn't know, but I'm like, I had to come to a decision where like I was sitting here going, I'm in this relationship. And number one, I'm not in love with this man that I'm with. He's demeaning my character. There's abuse happening, right? I do not feel complete and I do not feel whole.
Okay.
And I am stuck and I am in this space of, I'm fighting depression. I'm fighting high anxiety. I'm fighting loneliness. I'm fighting just every single thing, including some suicidal tendencies that fell through because God stopped it. So all of these things that were happening, and I was like, I am not satisfied and I'm not happy where I'm at.
You ready for the...
So then we're going to get, and then it started shifting. And then I was like, well, I don't think I want this anymore. Maybe I'm not in love with men anymore. So then I started searching elsewhere, obviously. But that
was Satan's first lie.
That was his first lie.
Was this person specifically is harming you. And so the first lie is maybe it's not him, maybe it's the entire, the entire male physiology.
Yeah.
So
the whole entire realm.
Became, quote, a lesbian.
I shifted my focus and I was like, you know what? The second lie came and was like, oh, maybe I was born this way.
Second lie.
That's the second lie. I was born this way.
You told yourself that probably to affirm that this trauma wasn't what caused it. It was, no, this is who God always intended me to be.
Right. That was the second lie. And it came so quick that it was like a quick turnaround. And it was like, oh, okay, well now here's this. And now I'm going to start moving my focus out this way, And that was huge.
So what year was this?
So we were still married when that first thought came. My son was born. So he was probably just a few months old. That was the first one. That's when the thought process, like the lies started shifting, right? I did not come out until 2015 in my early 30s.
Okay.
It was when I fully came out. But I was fighting those feelings. I was fighting the battles because I didn't tell anybody. And I actually tried to push it away. I actually tried to push it away so that it wouldn't be known because I tried to hide it. I didn't want anybody to know about it. I was like, well, I've been taught it's been wrong. You know what I mean? Like I've been taught, I know what God's word says about it. But at the same time, like I'm choosing to go this way. Like, all of those things were happening. And so I was keeping it just to the forefront and not trying to push it out and not thinking about it, but it just kept coming, And so I was like, man, this is not. It's like
it's the temptation of Satan. He told the lies, you bought into the lies. And then he said, it's a sin if you're trying to hide it, right? Like
exactly.
Who tries to hide something good? Right. No one. Unless it's a surprise party or something. But
that is true.
So you moved into a gay lifestyle.
I moved into the gay lifestyle. Yeah.
And while were you still serving in church?
I was still serving in church.
And then how long did you hide it before you came out? Like how long?
When I fully went into it, so I came out in 2015. I was involved in a church. So I was hiding it for 6 years, 5 or 6 years, something like that. Yeah. Yeah. And because I was really trying to focus on, and that was important, by the way. Well, and that really plays in part of all of this, really, when we talk about everything today. But I was involved in church there, and I was part of their team, and I was leading the choir, and I was one of their head runners for their team leaders. And so I was involved in it, and I was one of the drummers and training them up. And so I was like trying to focus on that aspect instead of trying to focus on this once again, you know.
Do you believe that being gay is a sin?
I think that, I think God's word specifically says it.
So I just want people to understand
this
concept because, you know, people in pastoral positions are supposed to be above reproach.
Yeah.
And while I agree with that, I think it's hard to take any one human and say that they're going to be sinless and then hold them to that. Like we need to be holding pastoral people accountable because they are privy to sin. Like everyone has it, right? That's the whole purpose of Jesus dying on the cross for us. And so it's important to recognize that you were in the church serving actively, like in a sinful lifestyle, trying to hide it. But yet God was still like trying to work in you and using you to serve while you were struggling with the sin. And I feel like it's important to showcase that, you know, some sins are different. Like me drinking too much on a Friday night is different than me murdering someone. But sin is sin. And you're trying to juggle it while maintaining a ministry. And that is how strong Satan is. Yeah. That he can take someone who is fully immersed in the love of God and in the church and in ministry and still say, I know exactly where to tempt you. And that's what I'm gonna use to mess with you for the years to come. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's his foothold, right? If he can get there, that's the major foothold. And that can be scary. And it's like, man, and I fought it. I did. And I fought it hard. I did fight it. But I just gave into it. I just chose, you know.
That's okay. I love that you say though that you chose now. So the lie is over.
The lie is over.
The lie that you were born this way is over.
That lie is over.
Do you think that there's a lot of this is totally opinion, of course, but a lot of gay people that tell themselves the same thing. I was born this way. Whereas maybe they weren't. Maybe they've been damaged or assaulted or abused to the extent where Satan has told them that lie.
Absolutely. That is actually the message in the left. That is, if you were to sit with leftists, right, if you were to talk to them, that is one of the main messages that come across is, I was born this way, get over it. Like that is their belief system. That's their lifestyle. Like that's why June is pushed, right? Because, and I'm trying to tie that together, but really when you look at June right now, the whole month, it's really pushing it. Hey, I was born this way. It's all over the place, right? And I believe that it truly is a lie. It was for me, and I had to have a truth encounter, and I believed it so much that it was like, I didn't care who knew about it, and I didn't care who I let know about it. Like I was very, it became almost an aggression where it was like, hey.
Yeah, so after you came out, you were like, all right, I'm out. I'm fully like in the lifestyle. Were you celebrating Pride Month?
Yes.
All the things.
This is going to be hard. This is the hard part.
Everything
for me. Yeah.
That's okay though. Like you're not here to, we're not here to like shame.
No, I know.
Your choices,
the hard part for me, yes. So I was involved in Pride. I was down in Pride on Father's Day. And you guys, this is not, when I look back at that now, that is a huge regret for me because I would have rather been spending time with my father, who I had done for years.
But your sexuality became an idol. And this is what I say over and over and over again. On my Instagram, when I blast Pride Month, it is of no offense to all my gay friends and my gay constituents and my gay patriots. It's the idea that it's become an idol. Like, how is what gender you choose to be attracted to or what gender you are attracted to or who you have sex with, how is that the most important part of your identity? And that's where I have a problem with it is I know plenty of gay people. I love plenty of gay people. I have gay family members. But when you take a whole month and say, I'm dedicating this to like the activity of my genitals, it's like, hold on a second. That's a gold statue in my opinion.
Yeah. It's
So
a huge,
to me, that's Satan said, you're not just this. Now it's taking precedence over your Lord. Now it's taking precedence over your ministry. It's taking over your life.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of fell into like the left lifestyle. Okay, now you're a lesbian.
Yep.
How did you get into like BLM activism? Because at some point you're going from like, I lead worship at the church to like, I'm destroying buildings. I mean, that's pretty, whoa. How did this happen?
Yeah.
Not that you personally destroyed buildings. I don't think you did.
No.
If you did, don't say it.
First of all, let me clear that because destruction behavior is not okay with me.
Good. Okay, I love
It's
it.
never been okay with me. It will never be okay with me. And I'm completely 100% against it.
Okay, so while you're at these BLM protests, and are you like, wait, what are you guys doing? Black Lives Matter, that's all.
You know, the only reason, and I'm going to say this as clear as day, the only reason that I joined BLM was because of watching that video of George Floyd. And the reason that I did was because I watched as he's saying, I can't breathe. And I watched the officer and his knee and his neck and he was killing him. Mm-hmm. And the smirk on that officer's face killed me. And you know what? I was like, dude,
a little brutal.
You need to go. Like, this is not okay, right? This is behavior that I do not agree with. You are killing this man. You are not doing what your oath said. Your intention, right, is completely inhumane at this point, right? Cold-hearted, inhumane, not okay with me. And I wanted my Black friends and family to know that I stood with them, right? And I was on their side. I had their back. And let's change the world together. Obviously, that's my my heart is to stand along beside my friends and family, right? And so I was, that's the only reason that I joined. Had no idea what the foundation was about. But I was down part of the marches. I did not march across the bridge. I had friends that were marching that got tear gassed. They were, it was hard. It was, I don't wish anybody to be tear gassed, but we're playing. We're playing. But yeah, so they were tear gassed and everything. I was a Lyft driver at the time and I was taking passengers to and from those riot zones. And then I was taking passengers to the head riot zone, which we'll talk about too in a minute because that was actually really scary. But that's the only reason that I joined BLM. Okay. It was not about destruction. It was not about what their foundation obviously talks about, which I'm completely 100% against. And I cannot stand for it.
And I will say this, like mission accomplished media, like mission accomplished. They took that one scenario and the officer happened to be white and the victim happened to be Black. And if it happened to anyone at all, we would be outraged because that is poor behavior in general, right? But they took it and said, ooh, this is racial. Like, it's perfect. And they just went with it. And it did things like that. It took completely, like, normal, inactive people to go, okay, this one video now makes, like, systemic racism, like, the biggest issue in America. Now I'm going to go join BLM. I mean, and it happened by the millions.
It was happening left and right. Yeah. That was one of the biggest movements I've seen in quite a long time, other than the Women's March, which I was also involved in. But that...
Lord, slow down. Did you wear please tell me you didn't wear the vagina hat.
No, okay. I did not wear the vagina hat.
This podcast would be over. Too far.
No. I did not wear the vagina hat, but I was in the march. So, but no, they took that completely out of control. And so I was just like, you guys, and it was so easy to believe, like, and BLM took it so out of control and so out of context. It was easy for anybody to just believe it and just join. And the movement was so wild. And I was like, wait a minute, you know.
So this is 2020. So we know that this is about June, I think the end of June in 2020 when George Floyd
George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Elijah Wood. Yeah.
Okay, and I want to give people some perspective. I think this is amazing, and we just figured this out last night. That while you were going through your abusive relationship, I was going through mine. We are the same age.
Yes, we are.
And while you were protesting BLM, BLM was threatening to burn my salon down and kick my ass, quote, literally, on social media. So we are going through the same things, and God is putting us through the same things in our 20s, which will form who we are. But in 2020, we're on complete opposite sides of the spectrum. I am finding the Lord and finding my strength in the Lord by defying lockdowns and taking on the government and fighting BLM and fighting Antifa, and you're joining them. So I think that this is hilarious because now fast forward 2 years later and we're chit-chatting on podcasts. But
right.
So,
we're friends on top of that.
you're my arch enemy. You're in the BLM protests. I'm posting on Facebook against the Women's March. I think this is hilarious, and I totally got canceled for that because that was a few years before. And gosh, what else? Oh, you're pro-choice. So tell me about your transition, because I want to tackle all of these really sensitive subjects that you're now speaking out against. Mm-hmm. How you became like pro-choice. Is there a story there? Was there a trigger? Was it just the leftist movement kind of indoctrinating you?
It was a little bit of both.
Okay.
I was with my partner at the time, and she's very pro-choice, like extreme pro-choice. Mm-hmm. And we had talked about marriage and everything else. And I was joining her with that thought process of, hey, that's probably right. Like, my body, my choice. And I was trying to be supportive, not only for her, but like for all women in general. Like, that was my thing, was that it was like, why not? Why not allow them to make that choice, right? Like, it's not for me to say what you can and can't do. Like, this was all the thoughts going through my head.
Is your little Jesus voice saying, well, you believe in life, though. You believe that life begins at conception. However.
Yes.
Okay.
He spoke through my son, too, to tell me that, by the way.
Well, because I think, like, again, mission accomplished. They choose one slogan, my body, my choice. And you're like, well, I kind of agree. I want to get tattoos and I want to get my nose pierced. Like, it's my body, my choice. My body. Yeah. Hard to argue with, right? I don't want to wear a mask. But that's not what it's about. But they cliche it to the point where you go, yeah, I guess I do kind of agree. Mm-hmm. And I've heard a lot of Christians say, well, I personally don't believe in abortion because I believe that life begins at conception. But I can get behind other people having the right to choose. And you're like, wait, so you can get behind people murdering babies as long as you're not murdering babies.
Oh, yeah.
And so it just shows how easily manipulated we can be by one slogan, one catchphrase, one tiny belief system that wipes out all other belief systems.
Just one. Yeah.
So did you go to pro-choice marches? Just tell me the truth.
I did. Well, if you want to consider, the only march that I chose to go to as far as the marches was the Women's March. And that was when Trump got into office, by the way.
And she hated Trump.
I hated Trump at the time. I do not anymore. I almost wore my shirt.
Like, this is the perfect moment. Trump's going to say whatever he needs to say in this moment.
ISIS has spread like cancer. Another mess I inherited.
And that wasn't the most appropriate statement, Trump.
It wasn't the most one. That's okay.
That's all right. So Trump got elected. You hated him too. I mean, you're like full legit leftist.
I was full leftist.
Yeah.
Like, when
Is there anything not leftist about you? Let's think. Was there anything?
There was nothing. I went completely. I shifted like that.
Yeah. Wow.
Like, as soon as
not like that. Like, your transition from God and your belief system in the church was a trickle of like different people harming you, hurting you, indoctrinating you, convincing you. Yeah. The media played a part. I mean, I believe that you are one of millions of people who just a little belief system here, a little compromise here, the media telling you one thing here, and all of a sudden we've got all of these millennials screaming systemic racism and my body, my choice, and to the point where it's like, all other morals are off the table. Mm-hmm. So I believe that you're a victim of the indoctrination of this world and the media and the leftist movement. Yeah. And so, so we're caught up to 2020-ish.
Right. Yeah.
What started changing? Like, what's happened in the last 2 years?
Well, there's a lot to that. This might be the emotional part because it's so amazing what God did, but I was full. So at this point, in 2020, I was still full leftist, like, and my whole mindset was in all areas, like completely 100% full leftist, and in all areas, spiritually, sexually, like all of it. And,
so God was nowhere right? Well, you're a lesbian and a
So-
leftist. And like, where was he in your heart?
Let me tell you my thought process here.
Okay. Ooh, juicy.
So this is going
Of
to be
course I wanna hear your
good,
thought
right?
process, yeah.
Because you and I can have this conversation, and obviously we've been having it from the get-go. But one of the things that when you talk to leftists, one of the messages is they're very spiritual people, right? So their spirituality is wrapped up really in their identity. It's really part of who they are. But for me, had growing up in the church, I really knew kind of like I wanted to keep God close to me. Like I always knew to always call on God's name, But my thought process after being around, a lot of leftists and their thinking was, and this is where it gets really crazy, is my belief system became, if I'm in alignment with God,
Okay.
then I also am God. Did you hear that?
Ooh, yeah.
Okay. So that's a whole, and if you talk to leftists right now, that is huge.
If God is in me, then I am
If
him.
you have
it's
a relationship with God
self-righteous-
and you're in alignment, then you are God. Boom. How whacked is that?
Pretty whacked.
Right? That's pretty whacked.
Yeah, because then your entire moral system, and I've said this for years, is based on an ever-changing, moment. Right now, I can think murder is bad, but why is it bad? Because I say so. Well, what if I say it's not bad? Then it becomes my new moral, boundary. My new line in the sand can shift at any whim or emotion, and that explains so much. And how's terrifying.
It's anything can shift like that. That's what the enemy uses, right? Is kind of that light, and it's all based on light too. That's the other thing. Like, oh, here comes this light, and here you are, God too. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute.
So the idea that, well, if I'm in alignment with God and I am God, then what I say goes. That
means I have
belief
all
system.
power.
What I say is the Bible. What I feel is the truth.
That means you're taking his place. Hello.
You're looking at someone right now. Someone needed to see you look at them.
Somebody needs to hear it. Whoever's
Okay.
listening today needs to hear it.
So, and let's just touch really quickly on you also have a little bit of resentment toward the church, AKA God, because you were cast out when you came out. Which, of course, I'm going to say I can't fully disagree with, but we'll get into that.
We'll talk a little bit about that. Yeah.
So when you came out as a lesbian, the church was obviously like, okay, you can't be part of this church.
Well, this is also part of the other lie, right? So this is going to be a great thing because, and I think that the term cast out usually is used by the leftists. And if you talk to them, again, that's the LGBT world is very much like that. They're disowned. They're cast out. They're all this stuff.
Oppressed.
Right. Yeah. My friends and family that are really solid in God know that they're against the lifestyle. They're not against me, but they're against the lifestyle, which is understandable, right? But at that time, I was like, oh man, now I'm internalizing going, okay, now are they casting me out? Are they like, you know what I mean? Like all the,
so your brain was telling you more like everybody hates me as opposed to Satan.
That's right.
The third lie.
Takes it as a hate crime, by the way.
Lie. Okay.
There's another lie, right?
Yeah.
See how it's all lining up? Like,
if they don't stand for what you stand for, then they hate you.
You're right.
Right.
I will say this. My family never disowned me. Let me just say it that way. They never disowned me. They were hurt and they were, I pained them. And I remember when I had to tell them that I had switched, right?
And you knew your dad would be disappointed.
I knew, I knew they both would. I'm a daddy's girl.
Yeah.
So when dad got hurt, then it hurt me more. And
it hurts you even more because you're like,
yeah,
he's hurt by who I am because the lie had been, that's who I am. That's my identity.
That's who I am.
So technically you're disappointed in who I am.
You're disappointed in who I am.
Yeah.
We had a really heart-to-heart conversation. I said, Dad, I'm not trying to hurt you. I told my mom too, but I said, Dad, I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to find me. And I'm trying to do it based on what I feel and what my desires are and how I'm going. It is nothing against you, but this is who I am. And he shared with me what he believed the word to be and as a sin.
And no one wants to hear that.
Nobody wants to hear that. And I put up the wall. Listen, I put up the wall to say, no, like I'm not going to listen to this because the moment that I decided to go this way was the beginning of the shift, because as soon as I did that, I had already made up my mind. I'm going this way. Nothing can change it.
Right. I mean, you literally built a wall and said, no, thank you, God.
I literally said,
I don't care
no.
what your word says. I don't care
Yeah.
what my dad says the word says. This is my
Right.
choice, and
This
you are
is-
not welcome in it.
Exactly. And it wasn't, my intention was never to hurt anybody. It was just literally like, I'm going this way. You know what I mean?
Oh, man, I don't think anyone goes, I'm so mad at my dad. I think I'm going to be a lesbian just to piss him off. Like,
Yeah.
I don't
Here,
think
Dad,
that's
I'm
how
gonna-
that ever
Yeah.
goes.
Here, I'm just going to do this. Be like,
That's a
no.
really big rebellion. To like,
But it caused a division
of
because I was spending more time with my partner than it was with my family. And
well, and like, how do you bring a partner home if your parents are like,
You
"We
don't,
just
'cause they didn't
Because
want
then
them around.
they know, their partner knows that your parents don't agree, and it just gets awkward.
yeah. And it caused abuse in that relationship, by the way.
Okay.
So
Wait, so you're.
I've been in back-to-back abusive relationships,
Okay.
both narcissists. We want to talk about that.
Yes, we do, because
I
I
wanna
want to
talk
say
about that today.
right now that you left a male marriage and said, I'm going
Yes.
to be a lesbian because I won't get abused because he's a narcissist. And then you went
Yes.
straight to a narcissistic, abusive female.
Two different genders.
Both narcissists.
Both narcissists, both abusive. One's a functional alcoholic who gets worse.
Which one?
Her.
Okay.
Sorry. She's a functional alcoholic and abusive, not only to me, but also to my kid. So it just tripled down the effect.
Oh, gosh.
Right?
Yeah. Well, talk about,
An
okay.
extreme feminist, by the way.
Yeah, and talk about how you thought, oh, this will solve my problem. You cut God off and said, well, this will solve my problem. And then you went to another human,
Yeah.
lived in sin, and then we're like, well, this didn't solve a problem either. It's almost like God was saying, how's that working out for you, Amy? Like,
Yeah, I know.
did being a lesbian solve all your problems?
It
Or
did
it create
not.
more?
It did not work.
God
it made
has a
it
way.
worse.
God has a
it made it
way.
worse. I think it
stinker.
just right.
Yeah.
He's like, wait a minute. Yeah. I kind of was in a rebellion.
Yeah.
It was a resistance. Really, it was like I'm going to resist God because I'm going this other direction, right? I'm choosing to. There's a term to like an entertain this thought. Entertain
to
this
the point,
thought.
so much to the point where it becomes
me.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
would you say after coming out
Yeah.
that the church didn't necessarily cast you out, that you kind of just distanced yourself because you're like, oh, I don't really belong here anymore? Did your dad run and tell everybody? Did you come out to the church?
So they're on social and I'm on social.
Mm-hmm.
People were going behind my back to them and they were talking about it. And in the back of my mind, I was like, just come to me.
Yeah.
Just tell me.
Yeah.
Because like I'm talking to these people, like you know them and you know me. Come to me.
Right.
You're going behind my back and you're going to them. That's not fair either.
So it's like they wouldn't rat it on you, like, hey, your worship
They-
drummer is a lesbian now.
They never ratted on me. People were going to them. They were concerned because, they didn't want me to post on social. They asked me not to, but at the same time, I'm like, I'm going to do it because this is
you're
my
still
social
representing
media.
the church.
I'm still
you're
representing.
still
Yeah.
drumming.
So
Okay.
they're also representing the church, right? They're ministers. They're traveling. They've got pastor friends everywhere and family and friends that are saved watching this happen.
Right.
And they're watching me. It was like a bombshell that dropped, poof, just like that.
Right. Okay.
Right.
So I'm going to say this. This is so super controversial.
Yeah.
They were sort of right? Because if you're drumming in their worship team, but yet you're living in sin, they can't have that because then it's like the church is endorsing like, hey,
Yeah.
like if the pastor was an alcoholic and they're like, it's okay, don't worry about it. Like he's drunk every Sunday when he preaches. Is that okay? I mean, no, right? So it's like maybe the way they handled it, and I don't know, we haven't even talked about that. Maybe they could have handled it better. Maybe the people in your church could have handled it better. But the reality is, if I were to visit a church and the pastor was gay, I'd be like, oh, it doesn't really work for me because you're supposed to be preaching the word and the word says that that's a sin. So
Yeah.
that's a complete contradiction in the church. So how do you feel? I mean, do you agree or do you wish that it would have been handled differently? Or was it, obviously it was hurtful, but the whole situation is going to be hurtful.
Everything was hurtful. There's not one moment that wasn't. One of the things that I did was internalize so much that it was like the lie that the enemy was telling me. Here, let me just say this. One of the lies that the enemy was saying to me was, look what you've done.
Like caused all this chaos.
Look what all the chaos you caused, all the collateral damage
You are nothing. You are worthless.
You are nothing.
You're a problem.
Why go back to God now? That's what he was telling me. All these things that were in my head was like, don't do it. Just keep going down this road. And I kept pushing like that. So I say that internalizing because I agree now that they had the right to say that's wrong, right? That's their belief. They're strong in the word, and that's okay. But then it was like,
well, yeah, I mean,
you know what I mean?
And then you can't rationalize or think logically because you're not living in the Holy Spirit. And you're not living in God's word. So how can you sit back and go, you know what? They're right. I am living in sin, and I agree. You should, I shouldn't be drumming. It's like if you're not in God's will, you can't discern God's will.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, to hear you say it now, because you've come back to the Lord and, you've given your life to the Lord again and started kind of asking him for guidance. It's like you can see clearly now and clarity.
Clearly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Complete turnaround. Yeah.
So if we're, here now and you have given your life back to God.
Yes.
What's the current status like?
Where I'm at.
Yeah, because I've gotten to watch your growth over the last year, and you struggle with things, and you're still trying to give everything to God. So
I am. Yeah, there's still moments that I do battle, and there's still moments that it's harder than others. But I will say this, and God has been dealing with me on it about just letting completely go. So pray for me, for those that need to pray for me. But that is, and it's been freeing because it's been like, okay, he's a chain breaker, and he's been breaking it off of me, and so, I'm not perfect. I struggle like anybody else, but I am seeking God and seeking him out, and he will tell me when it's time, but he's literally like just breaking it off.
That's so amazing.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
he's the only one that can.
He's the only one that can. And my relationship with God is just that. It's my relationship with God. And he will deal with me and he does that. And so, yeah.
Well, I find it interesting now having this conversation with you because we've had so many. We have epiphanies all the time.
That's true.
The reason that I started ministering to you was because I felt, and this was a message you conveyed, that the church had cast you out and that your family had disowned you and all these things for coming out. And my ministry to you was that the Lord is not the church. The Lord is not any one human. The Lord is, your relationship with him and having that relationship and calling on him to guide you and praying about your choices and how you live your life and all those things. And I'm intrigued and I'm so in awe that as we sit here, my entire ministry to you was not real. Like the church didn't cast you out. It was your perception. Your family didn't disown you. It was your perception because in your mindset, you were convinced that you were the victim, right? And this is just a year ago that that's the message you conveyed was like, I am who I am. I was born this way. The church treated me badly. My family disowned me. And I ministered to you based on that. And it's not a lie.
It's not a lie.
But it is Satan's lie because it was your perception of your life because you wanted to live the way you wanted to live with or without God's permission. And that victim mentality, God used to open the door because now it's been a year, year and a half, and the story changes because your perception has changed because God has spoken wisdom into you about now that you're with me and now that you're consulting me, let me show you with open eyes how that really went down and whose fault is it? It's not the church's fault for saying, hey, you got to live a righteous life to be in ministry. And your dad's saying, hey, I love you, but I can't endorse this. If I endorse it, I approve of you going against God's will. And I say this with like the extreme risk of losing followers and losing gay friends. And it's like, I can't tell you that your lifestyle's okay because that would mean me rebuking the Lord. And there is no one on this earth, there's no friendship that's worth preserving for me to say, I rebuke God's word. I rebuke what he's told us. I rebuke his belief system, his Bible. in order to salvage that relationship. And again, I love my gay friends and I love my gay family members, and I make no judgments. But to ask someone to say, deteriorate your entire belief system
Yeah.
so that I feel okay, so that I get your permission to live the way I want to live. A true Christian can't do that. You know, a real belief in God says, I believe you all the way with, you know, black and white truths in the Bible, no matter whose feelings it hurts. And we heard a little bit of that last night at Freedom Night. I believe that God was sort of speaking to you through John Cooper, the lead singer of Skillet, my favorite band, saying, you know, there is an ultimate truth. And when you start to kind of water that down, then you end up with so many compromises that before you know it, you're a pro-choice BLM activist lesbian.
Yep. Not anymore.
So did you get to come back out to your family and be like, so yeah, I'm like kind of not going that way anymore? Or
They just started seeing the changes.
Okay.
They started seeing the changes because I was like coming back into the church a little bit at a time. And then all of a sudden, well, actually, what was funny is during Christmas, one of the traditions growing up was reading the Christmas story. So at Christmas time, they were trying not to, they hadn't been reading it because I didn't want to hear it. They were like, so this last Christmas, my dad went to get up to do something, and I said, "Aren't you going to read the Christmas story?" And you could cut the air with a knife. It was like they were like, "Wait a minute, did she just say what we just thought she said?" Like my mom was looking around like this, and my son was like, "Wait a minute." It was like silence. And my dad was like, "Yeah."
Yes, Amy. Is Jesus back in your heart?
Right. They were questioning because honestly, I didn't really want to tell my story. I didn't feel like I wanted it to come out yet.
Right.
Because I didn't want to take the risk of judgment. I didn't want to take a risk of someone saying, I didn't want to give all the juicy stuff. I didn't want to have to answer to that stuff. But yeah.
So you've just been sort of like, you haven't really announced, hey, everyone. I mean, your social media has been a trickle of obviously like, I'm against this now and I'm against this now.
Yeah.
And that's why you're losing friends. But so your ministry is your behavior. Like your family is seeing the change that Jesus brings when he comes back into your heart.
Right.
And the love and the, what would you say to like leftists? And I feel like you have the authority to say it because you've been there, you know?
Oh man. Well, it's such a lie. Like I feel like the whole leftist movement is really based around identity. And and that is so wrapped around sexuality and spirituality. Like there's this hold on the mind that is like they really believe that's where it is, and that's not who they are. It's a part of who they are, but it's not who they are. And that makes the big difference, where who we are is based in God and who we are is based in Jesus. And he's the only one that is the chain breaker, and he's the one that's the peace speaker, and he's the one that sets us free, right? And so it's really about finding him. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's not about those things. Like I hate June now because June is so wrapped up in that. And I'm just like, you guys just ruined it for me.
June is a beautiful summer month.
You just ruined the whole month for me. And all I see is pride flags and marching and you guys pushing your agenda. And I'm like, that's not okay with me. Like you're literally pushing it into people's faces that don't agree with the lifestyle. They're not agreeing with that. And even though that's okay, you're saying it's not. And so therefore you're like pushing the agenda, and that's not okay. And I'm not okay with that.
Which I think is hilarious because forever and ever Christianity has been persecuted. Like, don't shove your God in my face. And why do I have to say under God during the Pledge of Allegiance? And why is that football player praying on the field? He's forcing his God upon me. And it's like, wait, hold on a second. You just changed the logo of every major woke corporation in America to your flag, and that's not pushing your beliefs on me.
No,
like so hypocritical.
I mean, it's major, and inclusivity. That's a thing too. And I'm like, technically, you're not, because when you talk about being inclusive, but you're really not,
because you don't include Christians.
You don't include Christians because when my friends are speaking up against against your issues, you're automatically, like I did, push against and say no. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Cancel them out. Shut them up.
A truth encounter is needed.
Mm-hmm.
I had to have a truth encounter.
And you
right?
did. And
I did.
You don't give yourself enough credit for being, a true child of God who had an open heart and an open mind, and you really did seek truth. You didn't seek your own truth.
I did not.
You sought the Lord's truth.
Yeah.
Which I think is just beautiful and commendable.
But that's seeing that in you too. And that was part of that. And we didn't touch on that too.
Oh,
that was seeing in you, right? It was watching your faith.
You didn't think I was a hateful bigot?
No. Well, I was nervous.
Every time I posted something, I was like, this chick's gonna like totally come after me now.
I think, were you waiting on me to like?
I was waiting for you to turn. Oh, heck yeah, I was waiting for you to turn on me.
Well,
absolutely.
Here's the funny thing, just so you guys know, I was waiting for you to turn on me.
Oh, I know you were though. I know you were.
I was like, wait a minute. So I don't know how much time we have, but it was watching your faith rise up, right? It was watching what God was doing in your life. Mm-hmm. It was watching your giants fall. It was watching how cancel culture came in and was trying to, they didn't try, they just did, attack you and your family, and they were attacking you. And I remember sitting there when your story came out to the headlines, and I was like, man, this girl's on fire. Like, there's something about you that was resonating with me. And obviously we know similar timelines and what God was doing. And watching that happen that inspired me. But then it was watching, because I was observing for the longest time. I was like, I'm going to watch and see what you do, what you say, how you're going to do it. Are you going to attack me here? Are you going to do this? You could have ran the other way and you didn't do it.
No.
You were like, I got you. Yeah. Like, it was like, okay.
That was the thing. I mean, I remember the day you messaged me and said, I see that God is giving you your voice. I see that you found it. Are you going to turn away from me? And I think it was the video that I'd posted about Pride Month, and I was moving all the Pride ice creams to the back. Like, I don't want my kids seeing this crap.
We're flipping
and I got
the magazine.
so much hate for that video. And that's when you were like, so do you hate me now? And I was like, no. Big difference between, being a gay person and then shoving that into my kid's face and my face and making it your idol. Again, that's all I stand against is you're worshiping it.
Yeah.
So it's been this beautiful dance of like, are you going to cancel me? Are you going to cancel me? And no one, this is what it looks like when there's true unity. And I don't think there can be unity by me complying with or aligning with the left. I will not sacrifice my values. And a lot of conservatives feel like this, like it's Joe Biden's going, oh, we need to unify the country. And it's like, but no, I'm not going to align with killing babies. I'm not going to align with drag queens performing for children. I'm not. And if that's what unity looks like, no, thank you. But unity looks like, I believe, the entire nation getting on their knees, coming back to the Lord, and then having their own clarity given by God to discern right and wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the whole country is wrong, I'm not going to convert a leftist. God needs to convert a leftist, but I have to bring them God.
You were that light for me, though. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the cool thing about when it comes down to that was cool. And I remember, like in the very beginning, especially when I found out you were a Republican. Just on Instagram, I was like, this post, I was like, okay, I have an option here. Do I send you the message? Because I was like, I'm going to push this to see how far I can go with this thing. I'm like, let's see how far this chick is going to what she's going to do.
Pretty far, dude.
And I was like, okay, I think we both took a risk with that, because when I look at that and I'm like, hey, I'm only human, because that was my thought process too. Like, hey, I'm just only human.
Yeah.
And before I knew it, you were already messaging back that I've already looked at your profile, and I'm like, oh no.
Oh gosh, you should have.
I wish my heart about dropped, and I was like, please don't do it.
I wish there would have been a fly on the wall when I was like, who's this girl? And I was like, whoa, you had a highlight for BLM. You had a highlight for women's choices. And I was like, oh my gosh, do I even dare? Or do I just block her right now?
Yeah.
This has probably been the most. God's probably watching. And he's got us like little, puppets going, like having fun.
But I just wanted to make sure I said that today, because, you were talking about ministering to me and it is true, because watching someone be a light to me and watching that unconditional love, like you could have been at any point like, I'm done. Like, and you didn't. You never did. You were just like, I'm going to love you through it, but I'm also going to speak up about my belief system here. And I'm also going to speak up about these issues. And that spoke volumes. And it was just watching everything. So I did not want to leave that out. I didn't want you to think
Thank you.
that was not real.
It's all the Holy
It's all
Spirit.
real, right?
I totally probably as a human would have ignored you, but I felt the Lord calling me to you. And I think it's because you are going to be a very loud, strong voice on many platforms speaking out against the leftist movement, the indoctrination and the lies. And who better to talk about it than someone that's been there? So
Yeah, that's true.
yeah. You know what your cheers is?
One of the things, there's two scriptures. Proverbs 24:16 says, a righteous man falls 7 times but gets back up. Right?
Yep.
And then my bestie sent me scripture, Psalm 30:11-12, that says, you have turned my mourning into dancing. You have taken away my clothes of mourning and clothed me with joy, that I might sing praises to you and not be silent. O Lord, my God, I will give you thanks forever.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So
that was
cheers to
a truth encounter. Yeah.
See? Perfect. Cheers. Thanks, guys, for watching the Patriot Barbie podcast. See you next time. Thanks for tuning in to the Patriot Barbie podcast. Follow me on Truth Social at The Patriot Barbie and Instagram at the.patriot.barbie. Subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with your friends. You can find this show, my book Targeted, and my apparel line on www.patriotbarbie.com. God bless America, and God bless you.
It's Dylan's KC Barbecue at 4 Valley locations. Our sports bar in Arrowhead is packed with TVs for the ultimate sports fan. Our Wildlife World Zoo location will have you on the edge of your seat, dining right next to our 60,000-gallon shark tank. Dylan's Bayou at Pleasant Harbor has never-ending sunsets, beautiful people, and live music every weekend. And our newest location, Western Trails Ranch, is 12 acres of rodeo fun and live outdoor concerts for the entire family. It's Dylan's KC Barbecue, where we're elite, unique, and memorable.